Hey, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. On this episode, we have Mopar lover, Charger driver, and all-around rancher Chris Birdsong, and we are going to talk Chargers today because as everybody else knows, I'm a Charger lover. I've got two. Chris has like 200, and he's one of the few guys that I think drives his cars harder than I do, which is unbelievable. So, Chris, how are you doing today, man? What's going on?
Well, that's why both of them behind me are broken.
Right, yeah, because you do drive them, dude. Yeah. How did you? It's interesting. Like I first saw your stuff on Instagram, and I was like, who is this guy doing autocrosses with these Chargers and just abusing them? And I'm not even going to say abusing. I'm just going to say having fun with them and enjoying them. How did you start with Chargers, and Mopars in general?
Well, I probably like most guys. It started with I saw just reruns of Dukes of Hazzard as a kid. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what a Charger was.
Right.
I just saw the show, and then actually I take that back. The first time I saw a Charger was go to the neighbor kid's house, and he had a bunch of Hot Wheels, and he had a General Lee Hot Wheel. And of course, I haven't seen the show yet. I didn't know what the show was, but he had this General Lee Hot Wheel, and I'm like, I just remember I have crappy memory to begin with, but I remember this. I'm like, that is my favorite car.
Right.
And then years later, I see the show and I'm like, that's where that car came from.
Right.
And I see it doing all the stunts and all the driving. And, as a kid, you still think that that's the same car doing everything.
Of course.
Every episode. You're like, oh my God, that car is indestructible.
Right. Superhero.
Yeah. You don't realize that they went through like 300 and something of them.
That's right.
But no, it was Chargers. And then as I got older, well, my family was all Chevy. And so
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my dad had a Chevelle. So I grew up with a 67 Chevelle. I still have the car.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was just a little 283 2-barrel Power Glide AC car, but that was my dad's daily.
Sure.
And then he got a 67 El Camino. And so I've always had a fondness for El Caminos, but I always wanted the Mopars. It's just, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know how to get them. And, and my dad is like, you don't want that crap.
So let's talk about that, because I have this conversation a lot with people where I'm like, they're like, the Mopars and, all this other stuff. And I'm like, from the factory, these cars were pretty garbage. Like these were not quality products that Chrysler turned out back in the day. And I always tell everybody, Mopars are great. Motor and drivetrains were amazing.
Yeah.
Everything else, a little bit. Has that been your experience?
Well, see, I got into circle track racing.
Okay.
And I can tell you the stock suspension on GM cars is way beefier than the Mopars.
Yeah.
You will not see Mopar guys or circle track guys running stock Mopar suspension.
Okay.
It just doesn't work, and it bends real easy. But yes, you are right. The cars, they created this masterpiece of this body, just this amazing sculpture. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, let's just make it run and drive. We got the body.
Right.
And so that's pretty, but the drivetrains, like you said, are phenomenal. I mean, I love the Mopar drivetrains. I'm a big block guy. And with the modern EFIs and everything, I like them. They're super efficient. The Hellcat drivetrain swaps, like I've put a Hellcat drivetrain in a Charger.
Yep.
And they are phenomenal. I mean, the power that they make, and then the reliability and the cruising. But then when you pop the hood, it's like, oh, that is hideous.
It's interesting because I've got, I have my 69 Daytona, right? And that we're doing a red eye swap in that car.
Yeah.
And then I also have my 68 Charger with Sean has. And when I say Sean, I'm talking about Sean Machado, who we're going to have on the podcast eventually, but we're going to talk about him a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. And I've always said in the 68, the Charger or the Daytona has always been a hot rod. It's always been modified and everything from day one. But the Charger, I've always said, will always have an old school big block, and it will always have a carburetor on it. Yeah. And I think there is something to be said for that when you pop the hood and you see it, because for you and I, we've had these cars for so many years now, and you are looking now at literally a piece of history. Like when you drive these cars, for us, it's commonplace to go into the garage and you're like, oh, this is a Charger or whatever the case is. But then I try to think about when was the last time I physically saw a Charger on the road? When was, other than yourself, when was the last time you saw another Charger on the road?
I have a niche of people I know.
Well, aside from that.
But aside from them, never. I rarely do I see any classics.
It's, well, that's the whole thing, right? So like, it was interesting when I drove my car down to Sean's. Now, the gentleman who's restoring my 68 is down in Palm Desert. I'm in San Francisco. That's about 500 miles. And we just, I'm like you, like got it. The car ran fine, got in, turned the key, drove it down there, right? And it was, by the time we got there driving through the day, it was covered in dirt and dust and everything else. And everybody's like, where did you come from? I was like, oh, the Bay. And they were like, that's like 400 miles away. I go, yeah, it's fine. It's a car. It's what it was meant to do. And people kind of forget that.
You know, speaking of that, to me, like the generally that I have, the car always looks better when it's dirty. So like the very rare instances that we do get rain in Las Vegas, it would start raining and I would jump in the car, take it out in the desert and bonsai the crap out of it, get bushes stuck in the bumper, mud all over the body, and then bring it back home. Be like, all right, now it's car show worthy.
Right, exactly. So how many Chargers do you have now?
Oh, you're gonna make me think. Usable ones only like 3. But
okay.
I have a lot that still need to be restored. I have rare ones that see,
like how me,
cars that are like patina. You've seen the turquoise one right behind me. That is far more.
I want to preface that. So I want to tell people that if you've never heard of patina, that's Chris's blue Charger that's sitting behind him in here. If you're not watching, but you're listening, you need to go to Chris's Instagram page. Chris, what's your Instagram page?
Junker Up.
Junker Up on Instagram. Just look for the blue Charger. That's patina. So, okay, I just wanted people to be aware. So go ahead.
But what I was saying though is that modified cars are just far more fun to drive, and you don't have to worry about the critics, where that's not OEM correct. It's like, this isn't, you don't have the paint markings in the right spot. There's supposed to be a sticker right here in this corner. But when you have like your ratty, just ultimate beater street cars, it kind of rules all those guys out to where it's just down to the fun factor. Right. Now the cars I want to restore, those are the rare ones that I want to do them right. So it's going to take a long time to make them perfect and, nice. And so those cars are all sitting because right now I'm just more about having fun and enjoying my cars.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big thing. When I first got into this hobby, I had bought my Charger and I've had it almost 20 years now. And when I bought, this is a guy that from New York, and I bought this Charger that was, when I bought it, the paint was flawless, everything was flawless. I was just so naive that I just drove it. Everybody told me not, you can't drive it here. You can't drive it there. You can't do this with that. You can't do that with that. And I go, and I didn't understand. Well, that was my whole thing. I never understood why. Yeah. And I was like, wait, I said, it's got an engine. It's got a carburetor on it. Everything works. Why? And you have all the peanut gallery that chimes in because it was one of the first pro touring Chargers out there. This was like 2002, 2003.
Oh, yeah. That's
right.
Before that, everything was just pretty much your aftermarket, or not even aftermarket, but just like your 73 Charger disc brake conversions and Krager wheels.
That's it, dude. I remember back then I put a set of bare brakes on it. And they didn't have a kit. We had to cobble it together out of and it was like, C4 Corvette calipers on a 13-inch rotor, which means I had to go to a 17-inch billet wheel, and people lost their minds. Oh my God, you animal.
It's funny as you're talking about this. See, I remember your black Daytona and I remember your 68 Charger just from articles and stuff before I ever even knew you or met you. Mm-hmm. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But everybody freaked out. They were like, I can't. And you got the old school Mopar peanut gallery. Well, that's incorrect. Yeah, schmuck. I know it's incorrect. I did that on purpose. Well, where are the marker lights? Well, they shaved them. Well, where are the drip? They shaved those too. Well, that's not right. And I got to the point where I stopped going to shows because I didn't want to hear any bullshit from anybody, because it got to the point where I was getting annoyed and people would be like, that's wrong. I'd be like, is this your car? And they would say no. And I'd be like, then get away from me. Don't talk to me. That's why when I started to see, and there are very few people that that really use their cars and enjoy them. And by enjoying them, I mean doing everything that you're doing: autocross, road racing, road tripping, all of that great stuff. Now that you do it, it's a blast to watch. And it's just, but you generally or genuinely have fun. Like every time I see you driving Patina or the General, or the shaker car, you always have a shit-eating grin on your face. Always.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I told the last autocross track, the engine in the General was hurt. It had a ringland piston, or had a ringland that lifted on a piston, I think. And it had low oil pressure. So it had some multiple issues. And so I told my buddy, I was like, it still runs and drives, but the engine's got to come out. So let's make it to where the engine has to come out.
Right.
So I told him, I was like, let's just take this thing out there and let's just give it a good send off. Let's just beat the crap out of this thing.
Yeah.
And so I let him drive it all weekend, and he beat the crap out of it. And then I end up seizing the motor up during the police chase.
So let me ask you, so when you were a kid and your dad worked on car, or your dad had like the Chevys, the Chevelles, and the El Caminos and stuff like that, is that when you started working on cars? And is that what your whole hobby is now, or your business right now? Are you a full-time restorer, mechanic?
Yeah,
or is that something you kind of fell into?
Restorer.
Okay.
I kind of fell into all of this because I just didn't have the money to pay someone.
Sure.
So I had to learn.
Yeah.
And then I learned how to do it, and then I got good at it. And then people saw what I was doing and asked if I would do it for their car. And then it just kind of morphed into what I have now.
Right.
But as for like my dad, he was not a mechanic. He was more of like a Jimmy rigger.
Sure.
And so he knew how to change spark plugs and change oil and all that stuff. And he was a classic car guy, but he was not a mechanic by any means.
Sure.
So I didn't really learn anything from him much. But my buddy that I went to high school with, he was a circle track racer. And so I would go to the track and help him. And then I got it in my head, like, hey, I want to go racing too.
Right.
And so I bought this circle track chassis that was upside down in a storage yard for $150. And so I get it home and I'm like, I didn't know how to weld. I didn't know how to do anything. So I bought some books, and I just started figuring out how to weld. And I cobbled together this race car, and with hand-me-down parts and stuff that people gave me. And so first time I went to the racetrack, I had like 5 different colored body panels on it, and just the car was an abortion. I had wide 5 hubs. Well, somebody gave me the rear suspension, the rear axle that was wide 5.
Okay.
Somebody gave me 5-on-5 front suspension. So I had 5-on-5 in the front and I had wide 5 in the back. And so this car was so cobbled together, but I went out there and within like 2 or 3 races, I finished second. And these are good events. I mean, there's like 28 cars and so, but I had to learn how to do everything in circle track racing. I learned the suspension. I learned how to weld. I learned how to do all of this because in circle track, we beat and bang and bust our stuff up, every week. Yeah. And I learned how to build engines because I couldn't afford nobody to build an engine for me. So I had people hand me down parts. And I read books. And so I learned how to build my own engines, suspensions. I learned how to valve my own shocks, everything. Wow. And so that's how I got into building cars from scratch, was circle track racing. Okay. And then, but see, I was only making like $15 an hour doing this. Right. And so I could never afford to get into the classic car hobby because they're both money pits. Absolutely. And so I got into the premier racing division, which is super late models. And I couldn't really do as good. I had a couple poles and I was leading a few races, but over time, as the races go on, I just would fall back to like second or third. Right. I just didn't have the equipment or the money to be a contender. Yeah, racing's not cheap. And then I ended up going to like Money Tree in between paychecks to afford gas, and so I ended up just having to hang it up. I was like, I can't do this no more. Right. So then I got out of racing, and then all of a sudden I had this extra money, and I'm like, well, I want to do classic cars. It's pretty amazing how that happens, right? Yeah. So then I couldn't afford the Mopars.
Okay.
But I loved the aero cars of NASCAR, the Talladegas,
Sure.
the Cyclones, and
yeah.
The cheapest car to get from that to build an aero car is a Torino.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I bought a 69 Torino for like $2,500 running and driving. And I cut the nose off the car and I made a teardrop Talladega clone because it's all just sheet metal. And I took the rear bumper, put it in the front, shortened it, all that. And I flared the fenders out and I made a Movie and Dick rear spoiler, Movie and something. So I made a duplicate rear spoiler. So yeah, I had this like full blown like Talladega NASCAR clone. And I'm like, yeah, I got a bitchin' car.
Right.
But then I saw on Craigslist that somebody had 2 Chargers for sale and they were heaps of crap. I mean, they were junk, but it was like $2,500.
Okay. What year was this?
I want to say this was probably 10 years ago.
Okay.
Oh, this had to be 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so I instantly threw the Talladega clone on Craigslist and sold it for exactly what I paid for. So I did all that work for nothing. And for $2,500, so I could immediately turn that money into those 2 Chargers.
Okay.
And I still have one of those Chargers today. But then you get one Mopar. See, Mopar guys are stupid. We all have.
We keep buying them.
Yeah, you can't have one and enjoy the one. So I got one, and then I found a better one. So then I got that one, and then I found a better one. So I got that one. Then I sold the crappier one to put money in the better one. And then all of a sudden, the better one pops out. And it's just a snowball effect.
It snowballs, dude. Yep.
Yeah. So I always wanted one Charger, and at one point, I was up to like 20 Chargers, just like wheeling and dealing and just stuff like that. And so that's how I got into it. So then I got these Chargers, and I'm like, well, crap, now I need to build them.
Yeah.
And so I started doing some sheet metal work, and of course, my circle track stuff.
Were you ever afraid of that? So like now, and I've seen your work, and it's absolutely fantastic. Did just because when you talk about like I had to do sheet metal work, when most guys think about body work, most guys don't know how to do body work. I have no idea how to do body work. But I know what goes into body work.
Yeah.
And you'll see guys that'll they're terrified to cut anything or sand anything or do anything. Was that ever something that concerned you? Because now you're just like, I'll cut this and weld this here and it's fine. Like, and you put cars together fast.
Not really, because
dude, in body shop world, you put cars together fast.
Oh no, I'm just talking like the cutting wise.
Yeah.
Because it's just metal. Metal, you can shape it, you can form it, and if you cut something off, you can always replace it. All the car is just a stamped piece of flat sheet metal. So if you cut something off, now if you're doing custom work, that's tricky and takes forever. But when you're just replacing panels, it's not really scary. Because now if you cut too much, then you just created a lot more work.
Right.
And I have done that learning. But a lot of times I'm fine with straight cutting up a car. And actually a lot of times AMD is having some issues right now with getting caught up from the whole pandemic thing. Like they're way behind. So it's harder to get the sheet metal right now. But say I get a car that's rusty, instead of like patching, like a lower quarter or whatever, a lot of times it's easier just to cut the whole quarter panel off and put a new one on. Because then you can address some other hidden issues that might be behind the back window and all other outer wheelhouse. Because if you just do a little patch, there's usually a lot more issues there than what you can see. But if it's like a rock solid car and it just has like some body damage or a little bit of rust, I always try and preserve as much of the original metal as possible because I love AMD. They're great. Yeah. But nothing fits like the original metal.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. That's the thing. It's like, there are some parts, even reproduction, as good as they are. Like it's interesting. I have a beautiful grill for a 68 Charger, an extra one. It's hanging in my garage. I bought it probably 15 years ago at a swap meet for $150.
Wow. Well, of course, that
right?
was 15 years ago. So yeah.
15 years ago, but it was a grill, and it's got all the vacuum pods and all the lights, and everything. It's a complete grill.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been lugging this thing around with me, moving it across the country and doing everything else. And I refuse to get rid of it because it's a great piece. And you hope
that it looks bitching on the wall too, right?
Looks bitching on the wall. Everybody that walks into the garage is like, where did you get that grill from? And I was like, swap meet a million years ago. But yeah, I think preserving them and trying to keep as much metal as you can. Let me ask you this. So, like I said, you've done a couple of Hellcat swaps of different cars. I know you helped Dave Freiberger with Mayhem and stuff like that.
Oh, geez, that was a project and a half.
Oh, that car, no doubt. But when you look at Chargers, like for me, like the body of a Charger, of a 68 to 70 Charger, specifically 68 and 70, it is to me, it's the most beautiful muscle car I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
That shape is just stunning. It's the only car that I always look at. I'm like, best looking car in history. Like I have two favorite cars, 68 Charger and the Lamborghini Miura, which is millions, right? I'll never get near one.
Yeah.
But the Charger, I still look at that car and I'm like, it's stunning. Now, when I see customizers, and you've got companies out there like Ring Brothers and all these other companies, they modify the body on these cars. And I have yet to see one that's been body modified that I go, no, I just never seen one improved upon ever.
No, I saw one at the SEMA show, and with Chargers, one of the most signature deals on a Charger is the scallops in the door.
In the door, that's right.
That's like one of the most signature features on a Charger. And so I saw one at the SEMA show. It was a white one. They eliminated the scallops in the door, and I'm like, you just took away one of the most signature features and one of the beautiful parts of the car and made it just a flat door.
Right.
Why? To be different.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll make the body lines way too sharp.
Yep.
They were never that dignified to begin with.
Right.
They were always had had a roll to them. And and I'm just not a big fan of the 17-inch wheels is borderline for me. I won't go no bigger than 17s.
Right.
Because the bigger the wheel you go, the smaller the tire is. It just get down to these little rubber band things.
Dude, it's interesting. Like when we did the car, the 68 years ago, it's got 17s on the front and 18s in the rear. Right. The Daytona's 18s all around. And the more I look at Chargers now, or any muscle car for that matter, I'm really starting to gravitate back to a 15-inch wheel with some real good. Chargers look great with sidewall because they're such big cars. They need that sidewall. Yeah. So, like I run a 285/40 on the 68 and the same wheel size on the Daytona, which will change, but for now it's a 285/40. And the reason is it's got sidewall. Patina, with the sidewall and the 15-inch wheels you have on that car, it looks right. Oh, and yeah. I remember years ago there was a YouTube video, and I'll never forget the car. It was a burgundy Charger with black callouts on the hood, torque thrust Ds, and the car was called Daisy. And I just remember watching this thing, and this guy was just slinging it around and around and around in a parking lot. And I saw that video and I was like, oh, and this is like when YouTube first started. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, that is the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. That car Patina really reminded me of that car because of the wheels that you have on it, the stance that you have on that car. And that car, you are really starting to build up into an iconic car, whether you know it or not. Like now, when I tell people, I'm like, you guys know about Patina? They're just like, oh yeah, that's Birdsong's fucking Charger. And I think that's an amazing thing to me, is that you're creating this icon.
I'm trying to make the ultimate street car, and it's also a tow vehicle too.
I know, which is cracks me. You and Sean with the tow Chargers.
I know, right? Well, see, I could, after getting into the restoration world for a while, and sitting on the sidelines in the racing world, I got the bug again.
Yeah.
And so I traded a 70 RT SE Charger for a dirt modified. Because I always wanted to go dirt racing. I always raced asphalt. And I would go to the dirt races and I'm like, man, looks like so much more fun than asphalt.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I pulled the trigger. I was like, you know what? I'm doing this. I posted on Instagram saying, hey, I've got a 70 RTSE charger. I will trade straight up for a dirt modified. And someone answered the call. And so I got this car. I go out for the first time and I'm like, oh my God, why did I waste 10 years racing asphalt? This is so much more fun. And then, so then the modified, we wrapped it like patina.
Yeah, that's right.
And the attention that car got when we brought it into the pits for the first time at a big show, we like debuted it at this big event. And I wish I had like $1 for every time pictures were taken and compliments, because nobody's ever done that. They've never, because the race cars nowadays, they're so flashy. They're so, look at me, I'm so gaudy, bright colors, fluorescent, sparkles. No one's ever kind of gone back to the basics of, you know, what a car is. And so when we rolled in with that, people were just like, And then the year before that, I rolled in with the General Lee pulling the race car.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, you know, whenever you see that, like Sean, you know, our buddy Sean Machado, he's got a 69 Daytona that he tows his 69 Daytona race car with to the racetrack. And if you ever go online, look for it.
You messed up right there. You don't want to tell Sean that his white car is a race car.
No, it's a street car.
It's street car. Yeah,
street car. Yeah. But there are pictures of the red car towing the white car.
Yeah.
And for Sean, it's nothing. That's just what he does. He's like, best tow vehicle ever. It's got 275,000 miles on it. It's the best, you know. But again, it goes back to driving the cars and using the cars. And like when you go out and you sling patina around, or you sling the General around, or you sling the other cars around, it is such an inspiration to, I think, other people that want to get into this hobby, because your whole attitude is it's just a car. Yeah, fine. They have an intrinsic value to that.
Yeah.
But it's still a car. What I love about patina is the exterior of the car is completely patinaed. It's got rust on it. It's got some holes in it. The interior of that car is like perfect. It's like beautiful, right?
Yeah. I tried to keep it mostly stock looking, but you cannot go around corners with stock seats.
No, you'll slide right out of it, dude.
Yeah, you'll land into the passenger's lap.
Exactly.
So I had to put some road race seats in it, but then at the same time, it's like, you know, because road race seats look so out of place.
I know.
In classic cars.
Yep.
And so I had my buddy reupholster these brand new seats. I had to reupholster them to resemble the stock upholstery.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, that's a good compromise.
Right. But so what is your goal with that car? What is your goal with patina?
I guess I'm kind of doing it. Just a daily driver, and then go out to autocross events. And I'm waiting for my decals to show up for the door. But so I have some, just like my race car, I have some numbers made so patina looks like the race car.
Okay.
And my thing is, I'll never have the money to be like super competitive in like the racing world.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't be the slowest, or if you can't be the fastest, at least look the best.
Right.
So when I come rolling into the track with this Charger, pulling the race car that resembles it, and everything is just jiving together.
Yeah.
Who cares who won? Did you see that car in the pits?
Dude, that's exactly right.
But back to the slinging cars around the track. Patina has good suspension. It's all like road racy and all that stuff. And it is seconds faster than the General Lee on the track.
Yeah.
But it is nowhere near the fun to drive.
Right.
Like if you take a stock car, clapped out suspension, everything, the body roll, just the G forces of it throwing around in the car, it like amplifies it to where it is like it's a roller coaster ride. Because I mean, it all adds to it, and the pictures that you get of a car that's all like yawed out, just left front tires in the air, and you go through the corners. It is just badass. Versus a car that's flat, not real exciting, goes through corners fast, doesn't really have any kind of body attitude change. But a car that is just wailing all over the place and just, it looks like you're hauling ass.
Right.
But really you're slow.
That's right.
People, I mean, when we come off the track doing stuff like that, people are cheering and all that.
Yeah.
When I do a lap in patina, set fast time, nobody cares.
No.
Because it's the excitement of watching somebody do something with a car that it wasn't intended to do.
Right.
That is the thrill.
Well, that was the whole. I mean, that was the Dukes of Hazzard, right? It
Yeah,
was
pretty
this
much, yeah.
this orange car that was a superhero. It could jump over anything, slide through anything, go through fences, go through walls, and it was never caught. And it was a superhero, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, I know for me, like, the older I got, I start to recognize Chargers and other things. Obviously, there was the movie Bullet, and there was Cannonball with that when that movie came out. But then all of a sudden, 2001, there was somewhat of a lull. Then 2001 came out, and the Fast and Furious came out.
Oh, that exploded, yeah.
And boom, Chargers were all of a sudden they went ballistic again.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know how many. I don't even want to guess how many Chargers that movie has crushed.
Well, see, I remember in middle school arguing with like the tuner guys. Oh, that Charger would have kicked that Super's ass, and then the tuner guys. Oh, the Super would have kicked that Charger's ass. You know, just back. We're kids. We didn't know.
Of course.
Yeah, but when that movie came out, I think I was in like 9th grade.
Well, when that movie came out, it was interesting because that kind of redefined. It almost put muscle cars back on the map to an extent.
Yeah.
Because of that one particular Charger. And the fact that the studio stuck with keeping, that character in a Charger through, I think it's 9 movies now, is pretty iconic. The thing now about Chargers is the prices. I never thought I never thought Chargers would be 60, 80, 100, 150, $200,000 cars.
$1 million car. Yeah.
And they absolutely are. So that brings me to another question is you drive patina all the time, right? All the time. And you drive it everywhere.
Yeah.
Does it make you like, I still do that with mine, but I am definitely more cognizant now of where I bring it, why I bring it there. Can I see it? Are you at that point yet? Or are you just like, it's totally fine?
Oh yeah. The fiance gets kind of annoyed by it because whenever we go somewhere, like say a restaurant or I take her to the doctor's appointments, whatever, I always sit where I can peek out the window.
Right.
But I'm a lot more lax now because I've discovered GPS.
Okay.
Because if somebody wants to steal your car, they're going to get your car.
Right. Exactly.
But it's if you know where it's at to recover it.
That's correct.
And so you can track it. And because I've had buddies that had their car stolen and they found the car, called the cops, and the cops wouldn't show up to do anything about it. Oh, that's a civil matter, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, at least if I know where the car's at or I can track it, I can follow it and I can find a way to get it back.
I agree with that. I had my 72 Monte Carlo was stolen in front of my house, years ago, 4 years ago. And GPS is on every car now. Doesn't matter what it is. I have a tracker on every car. So if you want them, okay, fine, you might get them, but I will find you because I can guarantee you will never find where I put that tracker.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. And by the time they find it, I already know where the car's at.
Oh, no question.
Yeah.
No question.
And if the car moves 5 feet, it notifies my phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that's where with the GPS, it makes it a lot more reassuring, but I get, some of the cars, you still worry about vandalism and, whenever I see somebody's classic car in the parking lot, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's badass. But there's some people that I guess you could call it jealousy.
Oh, sure.
And they feel that, screw this guy. And then he'll kick the cars, throw a bottle at it, whatever. And but I mean, if you kept it in your garage and you were so worried about anything happening to it, you're never going to enjoy it.
No. And I think, you have to drive it. And it's interesting, like with my 68 that's down at Sean's right now, it's been beat upon for 20 years. Last 20 years, I've been abusing the hell out of that car.
Yeah.
And I'm almost making version 2.0. I should say Sean is doing it, where we're putting air conditioning in it. We're putting new glass in it. We're making it a more adult version of what it was.
Yeah.
But I've already done everything that I wanted to do in that car. Like I raced it in the one lap of America. You know what I mean?
I still want to do all that stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. And I will, with all the little dings and pock marks and the paint and everything on that car, I wouldn't change it for the world. And I'm not.
Battle scars.
Battle scars.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, what have you done with this car? I'm like, what have I done with it? What haven't I done with it? I'm like, I've driven it across the country 4 times, driven it to Canada, driven it to Mexico, run the one lap of America. It's been on television. It's done at literally everything. And like you're right there with patina.
Well, I see one thing I can tell you too is like I know a lot of people are worried about road tripping their cars, if it breaks down or whatever. But I've driven cross country many times, like you, and I have broken down.
Sure. Yeah.
But even with the breakdowns, if you're in a classic car, people are more apt to stop and help.
Absolutely.
I mean, the longest I've had to sit on the side of the road without somebody stopping was like 10 minutes.
Right. Right.
Because hey, are you all right? You cool? You need any help? You need a ride somewhere?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But if you're just in like soccer mom car or a new blah, whatever, nobody cares. Nobody cares. No. I flew in like probably, I'll just use this one story as an example, but this is probably the coolest one. So I was driving cross country to Georgia to go pick up a 68 Coronet police car that I bought. And I was driving the General and I was pulling a trailer.
Yeah.
And I get about halfway there and I had one of those wheel bearings explode. I mean, it just disintegrated. The car was dead in the water on the side of the highway. Couldn't move it.
Yeah.
And I get out of the car and I'm looking at it. I didn't even have enough time to get my jack out and try and figure out what's going on. This guy in this diesel truck pulls up and he's like, "Hey, you doing all right?" I was like, "I think I blew an axle bearing."
Yeah.
He's like, "Do you know if there's any kind of like driveline shops around here or anything?" He's like, "No, you're kind of screwed on that."
Yeah.
He's like, "We'll tell you what, can put your charger on the trailer and then I'll tow you to my house and we'll fix it." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
I got nothing else to do. So
that's right.
So 2 hours, it was a 2-hour ride to his house. I get there, he opens his garage door and there's a 68 Hemi Charger.
Yep. Oh my God.
And I'm like, it's just total coincidence.
Yeah.
But we fixed the car back on the road. And then that same trip, I got stuck in a snowstorm with the General. And so I'm on the side of the road, the snow is actually building up on the car, and a police car pulls up and knocks on the window and he's like, "Hey, are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm just kind of waiting out the storm." And he's like, I've never seen anybody like this. I've never seen this before. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm just going to Georgia to pick up a car and go back." And he's like, "In this?"
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was like, I could have done it in a new truck or whatever, but I don't know. I try and make memories and road trips, and that is, I think, the biggest thing. Well, that's the whole thing. And I think that people forget about that. Right. And so like everything, and you're absolutely right. If you're in an old car, you break down, someone's going to stop. Right. Yeah. I have so many stories like that. Perfect example when I was doing one lap of America in the Charger, the fuel pump popped, the bladder and the fuel pump let go. And I was like, where am I going to find a fuel pump for this thing in the middle of nowhere? And we were at actually Road America. And I limped the car down there. We had bought an electric fuel pump, jerry rigged it up, got the car to run, but the pump wasn't big enough. A guy pulls up and he's like, "What's the problem?" I'm like, I can't find a fuel pump. He's like, I have a 68 Coronet with a 440. He's like, "Why don't you just come to my house? We'll take the fuel pump off that. You can put it on your car and then just mail it back to me when you get done with the rally, with the race." Yep. And that's exactly what we did. And so that I think, and was it a pain in the ass? Yeah, sure. We broke down. I had another guy. I was on a rally. I was in Canada with the Daytona right after we built it. And the grommet on the gas tank had split. And this was in the days where I used to go on the Dodge Charger forum, and I had put out a thing online. Guys, I was at the St. Mary's Inn in somewhere in Canada in the middle of the night. Went online. A guy drove 5 hours with a new gas tank and a grommet and just said, "Okay, here you go." And he gave it to us and we put it in. And like, that is, yes, did I break down? Of course it did. But that's a story and a memory that I will have forever. You know how many friends you make on road trips? Oh, absolutely. People you meet, just like the guy that just helped you out. I'm sure that, he's a friend now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And like you said, if it was a new car, if it was like a Camry, nobody would have cared. No, nobody would have stopped. But another Mopar story I have with breaking down and road tripping is, so my buddy's got Mike. You probably met Mike. He's driving the General. Mm-hmm. he had a yellow duster with a blower on it, 70 duster. And I'm like, I want one of those. And so I found one in Tennessee. It was a 340 4-speed, had a 671 blower on it, caged and everything. And I'm looking at this car and I'm like, that would be a perfect autocross car.
Right, yeah, obviously. Sure it would. Yeah, with the blower on it. Perfect autocross.
And so I fly there, I buy it, and then it didn't have a hood, and I'm going to drive this thing cross country, but he had this rotted out duster in the back so I figured he would just give me the hood, but I had to buy it. Then he was like, hey, do you have a torch or anything? He's like, yeah, we need a torch for it. I was like, why do you torch a hole in the hood for the blower?
Right.
And so I'm like, well, if I just torched a hole, it's gonna be ugly. So I kind of like torched some flames in it.
Yeah.
And then I bent him up so it looks like the blower's like poking through it. It was just a fluke thing that turned out bitchin' looking. But anyways, the first day, the coil falls off the car. And so I had to get another coil. And then I didn't want to drive all across country with the drag radials that are on it. So I bought some wheels and tires from him.
Right.
Just some regular wheels and tires. But I didn't have the correct wheel nuts. And so my fault, I just used the shank wheel nuts to hold the wheels on. I'm like, well, I'm just going in a straight line, you know.
It'll be fine.
No, it wasn't. There's a reason there's an acorn. So it ended up breaking 3 of the studs off of the axle. Oh God. And so in the middle of the night, I stopped at a Home Depot and I bought a mini sledgehammer because I limped it to Home Depot, which was like in Memphis or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to put the drag radials on it, but the drag radials are so wide and I got the car so loaded with parts and
you're rubbing everywhere.
Yeah. And so I'm in the parking lot of Home Depot on bottle jacks. And I'm rolling the fenders rolling the quarter panels, trying to get the tires to tuck in there. And so then I limp it to AutoZone and I'm hammering studs out and putting new studs in it. And then I went through 3 fuel pumps. They had those Hawley blue pumps, which those things are garbage.
Yeah.
And I went through 3 of those in this whole trip. And halfway through the trip, I fried the clutch. So I'm in Texas and I'm kind of like shit out of luck. You know, if the clutch is fried, I can in first gear, I can just creep it.
Yeah.
And so I text Freiberger. I was like, hey, do you know anybody in like the Dallas area that I can use their lift? And he's like, yeah. So Emily Reeves.
Yeah, sure, of course. Emily and Aaron.
Yep, I got her number, and so we go to because Summit wasn't too far from there.
Right. Yep.
And so I stopped at Summit. I got a flywheel. I got a twin disc clutch. I got new tires, new drag radials, and all this. So I went through 3 fuel pumps, some wheel studs, a coil. I had to tune the carburetors because they weren't tuned very well. And then and I stopped at an exhaust shop and had them weld an O2 bung in it so I can tune the carburetors with O2 gauge.
Right.
So this whole I look at during the trip, I'm like, this sucks, man. What am I going to break next?
Right.
But after the trip, I'm like, man, that was
pretty
a lot
cool.
of fun. That was a lot of I made so many memories, friends. I met Emily Reeves. I had a lot of, and then 3/4 of the way through the trip, I stopped in Tucson and I raced it at Zip Tie Drags.
I mean,
and so
that's
all this crap and all the stuff I went through, and I just made it to Zip Tie Drags in time, raced it, and then drove it all. I changed the gear. So when I bought the car, I had 391s in it.
Right.
I stopped and bought a 276 off of like Craigslist gear.
Yeah.
And so just in a parking lot, I jack it up. I changed the gear in the parking lot so I could drive all the way across country with 276s in it. Yeah. I get to Zip Tie Drags. I pull the gear out, put the 391s back in it, race it, and then after I raced it and all the crap I went through, I'm like, I don't feel like changing the gear again. So I just drove 55 miles an hour all the way home from Tucson.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's the stories, right? It's the memories.
I had so much. Thinking back on it, I had so much fun, and there's all kinds of little minor breakdowns I had too, but just like, adjusting rocker arms and losing valve lash caps.
Right.
But I had so much fun doing that, and so many other road trips. Like one of my good friends is Gary Enlow in Casper, Wyoming. Mm-hmm. The tunnel ram car, the one I call Smurf.
Yep.
So I bought that car in Minnesota, flew there, bought it, and it was like in the dead of winter. It was like negative 10 degrees up there.
Yeah.
And so I drove it to Mike's place, and then Mike had sold this purple 70 Challenger to this guy in Australia.
Okay.
And he told the guys, like, well, I can drive it to Vegas and then you can just get it transported from there.
Yeah.
And because in the wintertime, no transport trucks really want to go to North Dakota.
Right. Right.
And so I told Mike, I was like, well, does it run and drive? He's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, well, I just bought it a couple of days ago. I just wanted to flip it.
Right.
And I was like, so you have no idea if this thing runs or drives or nothing. I was like, well, the guy said it did.
Oh God.
And so, yeah, when we left his place, it was like negative 15 degrees. And we drive to his buddy's place in the west side of North Dakota. And we stopped there and we're taping off all the cowls on the car.
Yep.
We're
trying to get
a
heat.
poster board. And we're doing everything we can to try and get some heat in these cars because the heater cores suck.
Yep.
Or they don't work at all. And we're doing like,
Right.
I replaced the water pump and then we hit the road and I blew a tire in Wyoming and wrecked the fender. And then, but it didn't wreck it bad. And then
see, everybody's going to listen to these stories and be like, these guys are masochists. But what they don't understand is that this is, and I think there's some truth to that. But this is how you build experiences, and this is how you build stories, and this is how you build. You're not doing that in the Camry.
No, it's just the road trips and even though they seem like setbacks and problems in the moment,
right?
And the whole grand scheme of it, it's like, I had a lot of fun. I met people. It was
right.
I broke a rocker arm in Casper, Wyoming, and so I just posted on Instagram and going to local businesses, and I was like, hey, do you know any Mopar guys here in this town? And they called this guy, then called that guy, then called this guy, and then I got a phone call from a guy named Gary. He's like, hey, I heard you need a rocker arm. I'm like, yeah. He's like, where are you at? I was like, I'm at this tire shop, blah, blah. I was like, okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. He shows up with a rocker arm and he's like, hey, I know you. You're on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah. So we got to bullshitting. And now Gary is like a really good friend. I stop and visit him every time. Like all these people that you meet.
It's great.
You stop and visit and you create like a network. So even if you're on these road trips, you have a network of people. And then if you ever have an issue, you can call, hey, do you know this guy? Or do you know anybody that has this? Yeah. And so like the road trips are the best part. And I haven't done a whole lot of them recently just because I've been busy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to build some cars for Mike and I'm trying to get some of my cars done so we can get back to these road trips and just.
Well, here's the thing. So like I said, both my cars are under the knife right now. The Daytona's under the knife and the Charger's under the knife. Sean's.
Yeah.
We should do, and I was talking, do you know Alana Scher? Have you met Alana? You know Alana. Yeah. So we were talking about getting just Chargers together and doing a big ass Charger road trip somewhere across the country. So as soon as my car is done, you've got your car, Alana's got their Charger, their 69. Yeah. I would be totally down for doing that, and not like people think road trips are like, I went on this 200-mile road trip. I'm like 200 miles. Like I do 200 miles tomorrow. Like a road trip to me is like 3,500 miles. Like that's a road trip,
a week-long adventure, stopping,
that's right.
Food.
Yeah.
And it's more fun when you can include some kind of event in it.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So I think we need to plan that.
Yeah. So I've been making my cars more, I wouldn't say reliable because I usually break them anyway, but just more street friendly. Like I got a 6-speed transmission in the turquoise car and patina. Yeah. And I just bought a Passion 5-speed for the Smurf tunnel ram car.
Sure.
Just so that way I can have my good shit and get gears.
Yeah.
And then when I hit the highway, just click it in high gear. Well,
that's a massive thing. And like, as somebody who's driven their cars across the country multiple times.
Yeah.
Like one of the reasons, like the Charger's down at Sean's right now. And it's like, I'm like, I need to get more gear out of this thing. And I run a 727. I got 355s in the rear, but I also have a gear vendor on it. But the gear vendor is just
not that great.
Gear vendor it's not that great. Right. So I'm still
it's like a Band-Aid to an overdrive.
It is. And like, they're pretty bomb proof, but at 80 miles an hour, I'm still spinning 3,000 RPMs in that car, which is,
Patina's got a 489 cubic inch, 600 horsepower big block in it. And I just drove from here to Bakersfield and back and got 19.1 miles per gallon in it.
Yeah. I get 9 to 10 on a good day. So like now, as opposed to replacing the entire transmission with a manual, like Sean's putting a lockup converter in this thing. which will drop it down a little more. The hope is to be cruising at 80 at like 2,500 RPM. If I can do that, I'll be happy.
See, the old cars don't get bad fuel mileage because, you know, they got crappy aerodynamics, which that does help. But the reason is the transmissions are phenomenal nowadays. You know, these big blocks, they make so much torque down low. What the hell do you need to buzz it at 3,000, 3,500 on the highway for?
Right. You can buzz it at 1,200 RPM and be totally fine.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can be in 6th gear doing 45 miles an hour and just cruise it because these big blocks make so much torque. They don't lug. They don't buck and lug.
That's
and so you'll get fuel mileage by decreasing RPM.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I want to do the 68. You know, the Daytona would get 18, 19 miles to the gallon because that had a 5-speed in it. And like 80 miles an hour in the Charger and the 68 was 3,000 RPMs. 3,000 RPMs in the Daytona was 106 miles an hour. So like you would cruise that. I would cruise the Daytona at 75, 80 miles an hour. I'd be spinning 2,300 RPMs all day long. Yeah. Just say 18, 19 miles to the gallon.
Yeah. In patina, 75 miles an hour is 2,100 RPM.
That's perfect. That's exactly where you want to be. So let me ask you this, because we're literally coming up on an hour. That was the fastest freaking hour. Holy cow. Okay. So, all right, let's do this. So I know that, so for anybody, I want to throw this out there. So next week, Chris is going down to Willow Springs, correct?
Yes.
What day is he going to be down there?
It's the 21st. I don't know exactly what day it is, but it's the 21st.
Okay. So the 21st, Chris is going down there. I'm actually going to go down there as well. Our buddy Sean is going to go down there with a 69 Daytona clone race car. And these guys are going to go out on the track. If I had my Charger, I would be out there with them. Unfortunately, I'm not, but I am going to go down there. If you all want to see two Chargers, two epic B-body Chargers, 68, 69 Chargers, or 69 Chargers run on the racetrack, go to Willow Springs next week.
Well, there's also Challengers and Cudas and vintage Trans Am cars.
Absolutely. It's going to be great. Go. I'm going to go, you know, Chris will be there. Sean will be there. It's going to be a great time. Where can everybody find you, Chris? If they want to ask you questions about patina, if there's Smurf, the general, where can everybody find you?
I have a YouTube channel. It's Junker Up. And then I have the Instagram. That's Junker Up.
And Junker Up, Junker
Junk Up. Yep.
Right.
And I've probably become more known for doing like metal work on the cars because I have a frame jig that I just build B bodies from ground up. You know, just lay the frame rails in place and start putting all the panels and put them together. Mostly Chargers, but that's just kind of what I've gotten. More people that follow me, I guess, have more Chargers than anything else.
Right.
But no, I just restoring, doing all the metal work and paint and body on these cars and doing a lot of like drivetrain swaps, like Hellcats.
Yep.
Which if you really want a shit fast car that is fun to drive and reliable is a Hellcat drivetrain swap. I mean,
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get like, especially in a Daytona that's aerodynamic, you're going to be getting like 23, 24 miles a gallon, 700 horsepower.
Well, dude, we're doing a modded red eye.
Oh, so you're like, what, 800?
It's going to be over 800. Yeah.
Yeah. And just probably still going to get 23, 24 miles a gallon. I mean,
I can't wait.
Yeah. But as for like the purist standpoint, I do like seeing the big blocks in them.
Yeah, sure.
But the modern drivetrains are pretty badass too. So I like all of them.
Okay.
I'm just not a big fan of the rubber band tires and the twinkly doodad lights and the.
Yeah, I get you.
And you know the huge gigantic fender flares and.
Yep. Nah, dude, I'm right there with you.
Actually, I can't say too much. I have a full road race 69 Charger right here.
Yeah, well, that
gigantic flares on it. And...
For that car, I think I've been following that car for a while.
Yeah.
For those that are listening, you should go and you should watch the YouTube video on the Hemmings podcast and the Hot Rod BBQ podcast channel so you can see the cars. But okay, so they can find you at Junker Up on Instagram, Junker Up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just do a search in Google for Junker Up, and
or just my it's hey Junker Up at Gmail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is if you are interested in body work, fabrication,
or if you just need some advice or tips or.
That's actually another thing, Chris.
Because
Chris will talk to you.
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of these cars, and I know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And what is just a selling fad, or what's basically bling but doesn't really work in the real world.
Yeah.
I've broken a lot of stuff and where I've had to find things that do work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, all that, and in a lot of like restoration world, what repop parts are good, what is garbage.
Right. Yep.
There's a lot of that, especially out here on the East Coast. You guys have more humidity, so all the like rubber stuff lasts longer. But here on the West Coast, these repop parts, 6 months, it's garbage.
Yeah. Yep. Well, like we say, being from the East Coast, it was cars rust from the bottom up, where out here on the West Coast, they rot from the top down. Right.
Well, if you took an East Coast car and you took a West Coast car and you combined both of them, you'd have a perfect car. Like if you found a rotted East Coast car,
right,
all the rubbers, all the soft goods, all like,
right, it'd be in flawless condition.
Yeah, and then the West Coast car, all the interiors, anything is garbage. So just combine the two, and you'll have a good car.
Well, dude, on that note, I think we're going to clip it. But dude, thank you for coming on the podcast. Yeah. Thank you for talking Chargers. I'll see you next week, which is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh yeah. Oh, here I'll show you. So in the middle of just talking to you about the race car. It's actually right here. We're trying to get it ready for coming up.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Again, for those out there, you really need to go and you need to watch the video so you can.
It's all busted up right now. We're still got to fix it, but
that's outstanding. Dude, this is great.
Yeah.
This is just great. So
see, look, isn't this pretty?
Yeah. But that's just it is. And it works.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is it works.
Yeah.
It just works.
Yeah. That's the main thing, is just getting a car to function and be reliable and work. And the more power you make, I found that anything over 600 horsepower gets really expensive to make it reliable.
Yeah.
Under 600 horsepower, you don't have to worry about it as much. The parts are cheaper.
Right. So all right, so there we go. So anybody, if you have questions about Chargers, about parts, about fabrication, hit Chris up. He will answer you. Otherwise, I think that's it, dude. And again, thank you for coming on the podcast. And I will see you. I'll see you next week down at the racetrack.
Yeah, I got to get going on this thing so it's not broken. Sean will give me a whole bunch of shit if I don't show up with it.
Okay, very good. All right, buddy. I will see you and talk to you soon.
All right, see you.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.